Hi, I'm Isaac, and I am on the side of short age, which holds to a literal 6-day creation, and in essence brings a young earth that, and we believe, causes less erroneous views and doesn't have to be updated with new scientific evidence or anything like that, but also comes with the opposition of most of the world and many scholars who are more and more often holding to evolution and its ideas. I am defending the literal 6-day creation with the meaning of the Hebrew word yom. So as I go along, I will not only be defending my side and trying to prove it, but also trying to answer some of the questions brought up by the opposing side. And the first one within the realm of the literal 6-day creation comes from the idea of the days being too short to fulfill some of these things, specifically in reference to the day that man was created, and he had to, all the animals came to him, and then he had to name them, and then he was put into a sleep, and then woman was created from him, and all these things happening in one day. And it's hard to reconcile, if all these animals are coming to him one by one, how all this could happen in one day, because it's hard to imagine. But if we read the text, we realize that it says the animals came to him according to their kind, which gives the idea of a more corporate, more groups of animals coming to him as he names them and what that may mean, but the possibility of that being done within a day. So this begs the question, why do we assume it's anything but a literal 6 days? Isaac Asimov, who doesn't even adhere to the truth of Scripture, says that up until the early 19th century, almost everyone believed in the literal 6-day creation in the short earth. So what happened at this time? People began to question, biblical scholars and scientists began to question, is this a literal 6 days? So was man suddenly enlightened? What happened? Well, we realize that as scientific theory goes up and the idea of evolution increases in people's minds, that the idea of evolution becomes a presupposition. So people believe evolution, and then they look to the Bible to see how it fits into evolution and to see how it works. So this unproved theory has become a basis for which we judge Scripture, and Scripture has become the servant to the theory of evolution. The next idea comes from many people who will take the verse from 1 Peter and from Psalms that refer to better is one day in your courts than 1,000 elsewhere, and a day with you is like 1,000. And so we take these ideas and think maybe this first day here in Genesis, maybe that was actually 1,000. Maybe the week was actually 7,000 days. Maybe these things happen. But we realize that in looking at these aren't describing time, but they're describing God's time and how God is outside of time, so it's God's nature. And we realize, hopefully, that the truth is that God cannot relate to us in any other way than on our terms. If He relates to us in a way other than our terms, which He can do, but we cannot understand. So He relates to us on our terms so that we can know more about Him, so that He can reveal Himself through Scripture. So even though He is outside time, these verses aren't talking about maybe this day was this long, but God uses specific time, and in this case it's the day, to say this event was one day. Next comes the question of how things were able to grow if in this period of time, specifically vegetation like trees. How can trees fully grow in one day? And James Jordan says that's a question of God's ability. You look at humans who can walk and who can sprint and who can do something in between, and if they can speed up or slow down a process, can't God do that and infinitely more? Can't God create a tree fully grown, or a tree capable of growing fully within one day? Can't a God who is all-powerful do something like this or something completely different so that this works out? And lastly is the argument that the scientific facts in Genesis and in the Old Testament and the Bible are vague and incorrect. But we wonder, and James presents a similar example where he says that if I were to describe to you tonight's sunset, and use simple terms, you would understand it. But if I were to say the exact millisecond and second that it happened and describe the colors in the sky with their exact names and the horizon and how wind affects it and clouds, if I were to describe all these things, I would still be describing the same sunset. Is more complex more true? No, it's simply more complex. And so simpler truths found in the Bible are still true even without complexities. Finally, we get to the meaning of the Hebrew word yom, and we think about, if we state simply, Moses to his audience wasn't trying to describe or define apologetics, but he was saying this to the Hebrew audience, and what they would have understood was simply a literal 6 days. So you wonder, shouldn't we take it that way? But if we get more factual, Henry Morris, in his book on scientific creationism, talks about all the uses of the word yom in the Old Testament. 1,200 times or more it is used. 95% of those times it is the literal meaning of the word day as we understand it in English, which could be the period of light throughout the day or the literal 24-hour period. So 65 of those words are vague phrases like the day of the Lord or day of reckoning, which can still be the literal use of the word, but not necessarily. They could be referring to a time. So even in this 5% of all the uses in the Old Testament, it's possible that the word is still the literal 5 days. Next, we come to a way in which it's possible that Moses was assuring the audience of what the word literally meant. Yom is used 200 or more times in the Old Testament with a number before it. In this case, in Genesis, like first day or second day or third day. And then 100 or more times it's used within a span of time. And here, as an example, here in Genesis, God defines the day as with the sun, moon, and the stars, and the setting of the sun, and how it from light to dark. So there's 300 times separately that, and every single one of those times the Hebrew word yom is used to mean a literal day. We'll combine these, and that's what we have here in Genesis, being an absolute certainty that this word yom here is the literal day. And in Exodus 20, 8 through 11, Moses is introducing the Ten Commandments, and he again refers to the creation, the literal 6-day creation, and when referencing the Sabbath, a literal Sabbath rest on that day, so a literal 7-day creation. So in these things, the literal meaning of the word yom, we come to the conclusion, along with the reasons for the 6 days and the evidence of their possibility, we come to the conclusion that the word yom here is literal, and that leads us to a young earth and a literal 6-day creation.